Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into something kind of universal. Today, it's all about marriage. But, and here's the twist, we're going way beyond just the happy ever after stuff. We're going to tackle love marriages versus arranged marriages, a topic that always seems to get people talking.
It's really fascinating, right? Like we tend to think of love marriages as the norm, at least here in the West. But actually, arranged marriages are way more common around the world.
Mm.
It all comes back to how different cultures view the whole marriage thing, family,
Yeah.
individual choice, what makes it all actually work.
Yeah, it's easy to forget there are tons of different perspectives out there. So before we get too far, let's get everyone on the same page. Just basic definitions here. We've got love marriage, which is pretty self-explanatory. You pick your partner based on, well, love. Those can't live without them vibes.
Mhm.
And then on the flip side, we've got arranged marriage, where families, sometimes matchmakers, get involved. It's more about shared backgrounds, making sure things align for the long haul rather than just that initial spark.
And what's really interesting is that it's not always so black and white. It's not like it's all about love on one side and pure practicality on the other. You can have love marriages where families still have a big say, right? And even in arranged marriages, individuals might have more of a choice than people realize. It's a spectrum for sure.
Totally. It's like anything else, there's always some gray area. Let's jump into that, actually, starting with what gets people excited about love marriages. Our sources all seem to point to this idea of choice, like being the cornerstone, that you, not your great aunt or your neighbor, get to decide who you spend your life with, and that it's based on a real connection, shared values, that kind of thing.
It makes sense, especially in individualistic cultures, this idea that you're supposed to create your own destiny, find your own path, and a partner who fits into that, it's huge. Love in this context is like this key ingredient to a happy life. But of course, it's not the only ingredient, right?
Oh, absolutely not. Even if you're head over heels, every relationship hits a few bumps in the road. In fact, one of our sources told this really powerful story. This couple, they were crazy about each other, but their families, totally different expectations, different backgrounds. It caused a ton of conflict, even though their love was strong.
Exactly. Love doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's like societal expectations, family dynamics, even money problems, it all factors in.
Yeah.
You can be totally in love with someone, but if you're constantly battling those outside pressures, it's tough. It just reminds you that even in societies where love is everything, it doesn't just erase all the other stuff.
Exactly. It might be the spark, but it takes more to keep the fire going, right? So let's switch gears for a second and explore arranged marriages.
Oh,
What are the arguments for this system? To be honest, it's not something we hear a lot about, so I'm curious to get into it.
Well, one thing you hear a lot is about the family support system, because it's often seen as joining two families, not just two people. There's this built-in network, right? They're all invested in making it work. And that can make a huge difference, especially when things get tough.
Oh, I bet. It's like you've got a whole team in your corner from day one instead of starting from scratch.
Exactly. And, that actually ties into another argument, the focus on long-term compatibility over that initial rush of romance. It's about building a lasting fire, not just a quick spark.
Yeah.
Shared values, goals, background, stuff that research actually shows contributes to relationships lasting.
Interesting. So it's less about how intensely you feel in the beginning and more about laying a really solid foundation.
Yeah, exactly. And this feeds into another point. Arranged marriages can actually take some pressure off individuals,
Mm.
especially in places where finding a partner is seen as a family responsibility. It's not all on your shoulders to navigate the dating world. It can be kind of freeing for people.
I can definitely see that, especially with how much pressure we put on ourselves these days to find the one. But what about the challenges? I mean, it can't be smooth sailing all the time, even with all that family support.
You're right. One of the biggest challenges, at least from our perspective, is that there might not be as much personal choice, right? This goes back to what we were saying about individual freedom.
Mm.
In some arranged marriage setups, someone might not get much say in this huge life decision.
I bet that's incredibly tough to feel like you don't have a real choice in something as personal as choosing a partner.
Yeah, for sure. And that can lead to other challenges too, like needing more time to build that emotional connection, that intimacy. One person in our research even said it took time to really connect with their partner. It makes sense. I mean, you haven't had all that time to get to know each other romantically beforehand.
So it's not that love can't develop, it just might happen differently on its own timeline.
Exactly. And, we can't ignore the cultural side of things either. Some cultures have really strict ideas about gender roles, what you owe your family, how much freedom you have within a marriage. Those expectations can be a real challenge for anyone who doesn't fit into those norms.
It's like you're not only building a life with someone, but you're also trying to navigate all these extra rules and expectations on top of it. But here's something I find really interesting. It seems like the love marriage and arranged marriage, they're not always completely separate. One of our sources mentioned this couple who basically blended elements of both. They were totally head over heels for each other, but they also really valued their family's input, their traditions. Like they found a good balance.
It's a really good example of how those lines are getting blurry, especially nowadays with everyone so connected. And researchers are even calling it assisted marriage now. Basically, it means people can have more of a say, even if it's still kind of an arranged marriage setup. Finding that balance between what your heart wants and respecting family too.
I like that, assisted marriage. It's definitely more, I don't know, complex than just those two categories we started with. Makes you wonder if we're headed toward a world where it's less about how a marriage starts and more about what you build together,
Yeah.
however you get there.
Right. It's a good question. And it makes me think, we don't always talk about this, but whether it's love or arranged, don't they both need the same things to really succeed? Like communication, respect, being able to grow together. Those are important no matter what.
So it's less about how you begin and more about making it work. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the long game that matters.
Exactly. And that's why those individual stories are so interesting. We can talk about what usually happens, but in the end, it's about those individual challenges, like dealing with family expectations in an arranged marriage or even in a love marriage, just trying to blend two lives together. Being willing to talk and compromise is huge.
Yeah. It's all about that partnership, yeah, no matter how you get there. And one source even pointed out that even within the same culture, ideas about marriage can change over time. Like there are places where arranged marriages used to be the only option, but now you see more love marriages, especially with younger people.
It's true. The world's so connected now. Those ideas about individual choice, about romantic love, they spread, so it makes sense that it changes how people think about marriage too.
Yeah, it shows how much culture can change, right? It's not like it just stays the same forever. New ideas pop up all the time.
For sure. And even in cultures where it's mostly love marriages, I feel like people are starting to see the good things about arranged marriages, like maybe involving family more or looking at compatibility beyond just that initial attraction.
Kind of like taking the best of both. You're not ditching tradition completely, but you're also admitting that what worked a while ago might need an update.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like we're getting a better understanding of what makes a good marriage, taking the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I think so. It's not about finding the one right way to do things anymore. The cool thing is how much we can learn from each other, all these different experiences.
And celebrating all those different kinds of love stories. Because there are so many ways it can happen. Which makes me think this is a big question after everything we talked
Oh,
about.
yeah.
How do you think learning about all this, these different ways people see marriage, how does that change how we think about relationships in our own lives?
Wow, that's a good one.
Not just romantic relationships either. I mean, everything. Our families, what we want in a partner, even just our own values.
That's something to think about for sure.
Yeah.
It makes you question everything.
It does. It's like we're looking beyond just our own ideas about love and marriage and realizing there's a whole world of other ways to approach this. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, and maybe if we're open to those different ways of thinking, we might find something new, something that changes how we see love and connection ourselves.
I love that idea. So, to everyone listening, think about what we've talked about today. How has your own background, where you're from, how has that affected your views on love and marriage? What can you learn from people who see it completely differently? It's something to think about. And as always, thanks for listening to this deep dive with us.
It's always great chatting with you.